we've had a few conversations, right? And we've talked about sort of this log jam with, I can tell you from my perspective, my seat, I have a lot of people who, touch base with me like, Craig, I'd love to sell my house. Obviously, the prices look great. It's very attractive to sell. But, where the hell am I going to go, right? The idea of buying and selling at the same time. So, on that topic, I mean, again, from your seat, are you writing just a lot of pre-approval letters for people today who are in this position of like tentatively selling? They haven't sold yet, and they're trying to pull that off somehow?
Yeah. So, and they're all different. And what I mean by that, and I think anytime we're in a polarized market, whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market, and we're not close to neutral, you're going to end up with a lot of different stories on how transactions are occurring, right? Because people start getting creative to try to make it happen. So it's not a lot of like one-off pre-approvals. So the conversations I'm having right now are different for a first-time home buyer than they are for someone trying to sell a house and buy a house, right? Like it's almost a different competitive forest to walk through, right? Like first-time buyer, depending on the criteria, they might be in a tough spot because maybe they don't have the down payment compared to someone selling a house that has all the equity, but then their negative is they need to sell a house. So it's trying to navigate how we can, again, structure the mortgage so that it fits their financial needs, but also fits into the marketplace and makes them competitive. So with sellers right now that are selling to buy, a lot of the conversations circling around, can we buy without selling?
Yeah.
So can we qualify without technically selling our house, even though we plan to, right? Like, do we have the assets now for the future down payment without tapping the equity? Is there a way for us to get the equity to then still buy? It's coming up with any sort of creative process to then take them back to the agent to say, hey, here's how we can be competitive, right? Here's how we can maybe waive contingencies, right? Because we kind of just absorbing what's happening in the marketplace, and then we send that out to our clients and we give the best recommendations possible. So like that's most of my conversations. I feel like right now it's not very one-off, it's very nuanced for every client, trying to make it work because everyone's in the same market from the standpoint of multiple offers, competition, what are interest rates doing? Like everyone's seeing all that same stuff, and they're bringing different goals and different needs to the market. So it's not very order take situation right now.
Yeah. And let's be totally honest about your situation right now too, right? Like because I know you said you're not just sitting there doing pre-approvals all day, but I have a feeling, you're in a similar seat to me. You are doing a lot of pre-approval letters on these weekends.
Oh, yes.
If I know you and chances are you aren't having a ton of luck on the sort of, and again, like me, where there are a lot of offers being made and not a lot of positive responses, not a lot of deals, and I mean,
just you're
working for free a lot of the time. I know you don't say that to people, so I'm going to say it for you, right?
Yeah.
Like on these Sundays when you're sending an offer, and Monday mornings when I know you're busy with that. We've talked about it. Like I said, I know you don't say that to people, so I am going to say it for you.
Hey, I'm bold enough.
I say it.
Yeah, so we don't get paid till we close. So that's my job is just get you to that closing table.
Exactly. Right. And
the numbers just, if there's 20 offers on a house, only one's going to win.
Yep. So exactly. That's 19 people not getting paid, working the weekend.
Right. And it's kind of the market right now.
Yeah. And really might be, and I'm talking about agents and lenders, right? So it's really, when I say 19, it's really more like 38, right? So, I can tell you, I mean, I guess and I can tell you, I've written a lot of those offers that are contingent upon the sale of the current home, and by the way, I've heard that some people, out there are maybe putting, I don't know if they're putting deposits at risk, but maybe they're kind of being cagey with this information too, like not being super upfront with the fact that they do in fact need to sell, as they're making the offer. Have you seen like a best strategy to this? I mean, you're really good at sort of like, figuring out the, individual situation. Is it just as simple as like everybody's different and
everyone's
have
different?
Like a maybe best practice? Yeah.
So everyone's different. It's kind of like going to a doctor, right? It's going to a financial doctor. You don't want, how everyone else is being treated. You want to be treated based on your individual health situation, right? Like if you got a broken finger and that doctor is telling everyone they have broken shoulders, but you're sitting there like, dude, my finger's pointing the wrong way. Like, what do you mean? Oh, yeah, it's your shoulder. Here you go. Take this and call me back tomorrow. Like, you don't want the run-of-the-mill situation. So you want to be diagnosed based on your individual circumstances, right? And then that's really the approach I'm taking with any client that's selling to buy. Mm-hmm. And being able to waive that contingency, like you're saying, getting cagey with it. There's personal risk, and then there's actual risk. So the way that I go across it with clients, that if they fit the criteria, what I mean by criteria is maybe they already have some cash for the down payment of the purchase. Okay, great. So check mark. So you don't need the equity because you have 10% down, 20% down on the new house, right? Then the next threshold we're looking at is, well, could you technically on paper float both mortgage payments? So do you have the income? So
exactly.
Is there enough income there so that you could technically make both payments, right? We know you're going to ideally try to sell the house that you're leaving. And we know from talking to your realtor, it's probably going to sell quick.
Yeah.
So then if you pass those two thresholds and I say, hey, here's your pre-approval, you can do 10% down. You don't need to sell because you don't need the equity because you can still have some money and you can float both. That's now it's okay. Waive that contingency. Now it's personal risk.
Yeah.
So now your personal risk is, what if your house doesn't sell? So now you're floating both mortgages, right? I know we talked about the ideal situation of you close on your new house in May and then your house you're leaving closes a few weeks later in May, and you don't end up making two payments, right? Yep. You end up in your new place and you're good to go. So that's that personal risk. And then there's the actual need for a contingency, which is you don't have the money, you don't have the income to float both. You have to somehow tap that equity to get that money out, or you have to get to a certain point of the contract to then waive the contingency. So there's a lot of different ways that can be structured. People can pull HELOCs from their departing house. You could do a HELOC on the future house of the purchase, then get the equity later. Which again, it's like going to a good doctor. Good doctor's going to sit down, he's going to ask all the right questions, right? He's not going to just look at you and make a diagnosis and then tell you to move on because they just want to get the next patient in there. Yeah. Actually taking the time to go through the actual formal process of asking all of the right diagnostic questions.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you nailed it.
Give the best prescription.
Yeah, you nailed it. And honestly, I think one of my next questions was really just kind of like, what's the equation for someone? And you already explained this was, you know, if there is, I mean, the ideal situation when I'm talking to people in this sort of selling and buying at the same time position is like, okay, is there some possibility where, you know, depending on purchase price too, right, where you can carry, you know, two mortgages and we can kind of do this a little bit more smoothly where we're eliminating contingencies. We can still make a strong offer on the other side. And then, you know, and we sort of, you know, and then there are, if you're not in that position, you know, there are pros and cons and selling first, you know, before the next home is under agreement. I mean, the way I'm attempting to do it today, the reality might just be those financials are you have to sell first. And I'm doing a lot of the buyer client coaching before we list, right? So even if that ends up being the strategy, which it often is today, right? We have to sell, you know, I'm doing a lot of the like preparing people for the harsh realities of the market, you know, getting them out to open houses and just getting some of the buyer side legwork done, you know, before we're actually listing the house, you know, and it's funny. It's like, you know, you mentioned the doctor. I almost feel like, you know, the buyer agent today is like a therapist or a performance coach at times, you know. You got to know when to push people and when to pull back and, you know, what they're going to respond to. And, you know, and sometimes I get that completely wrong. Do you find yourself playing therapist a little bit too? I mean, again, I know you got people who you've probably written 6 or 7 pre-approval letters for at least, right?
Yeah, of course. And I'd say that's probably been a big part of my business since I've been in mortgages now in 2016. Yeah. The market hasn't, right now's market's definitely the weirdest market I've been in since I've been in it. And I don't want to say like it's a terrible market. It's just different. It's just a different market than we've all seen, right? We have a lot of different factors going into why we're in a weird market. And I think the best thing we can do as professionals is remind people that we're the professionals. And what I mean by that is you don't do mortgages every day, right? So why would you think that you would know everything about mortgages? You shouldn't expect that. I hope you don't expect that. Same idea with your clients as a real estate professional, right? Yeah. So it's about giving that education first and allowing people then space to make their informed decisions. and not applying any extra pressure that's already there, right? Because the market's already doing that. The market itself, just by us giving the information of what's happening now, just us relaying it. If I go over interest rates history in the past 3 months, I don't need to apply any extra pressure, right? Like that information alone says we were at 3, we're at 5 now, and it happened really fast. I don't need to apply any extra. I don't need to do any sales tactics, nothing, right? So kind of almost the same idea with you as a realtor is just, this is what's happening. This is what people are doing in the market. This is what I'm hearing from other realtors. This is what's winning. This is what's not winning. But then we also have to take your life, your situation, and how do we take it and apply it to the market, right? Because that story is going to be different for every single client.